dans la précipitation et le temps extrêmement compté de présenter.
I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce my fellow presenters, Irène Jonas and Marie Daucher. And you can find their bios on the site of ByPhoto. But now I will introduce our next speakers, Delphine BEDEL, Anna Fox, and Anna-Alix KOFFI, and who were kind enough to accept my invitation. Delphine is an artist and a feminist, a curator, a lecturer, an editor. You speak regularly in conferences. You write in parallel many articles. She's also founded Meta Books, working on design and emerging photographer. She is known for publications or educational projects in the area of feminism. She works with major leading cultural institutions, museums, art and design academies. She is an advisor with the Montreal Institute and a member of the German Photography Academy. You have the floor.
Merci de cette invitation, Agnès, Fanny.
Thank you for this invitation. It's the second year for me to come back. But since we have guests who are going to speak in English, I will speak in English as well.
Switch to English. Yeah, when I started to investigate on publishing under a term that I coined publishing as an artistic practice, I was struck by the lack of women in the historical narratives that I could find. All the anthology on photo books have, on average, I counted between 4 to 10% books by women photographers. So the erasure was almost complete. All the misrepresentation was quite pervasive. So I got interested in bringing back these voices that had been erased, and that became the core of my doctoral research. And so this is not what I'm going to talk about today, but this research led me one step further, which was to realize that if we wanted to bring change, we had to become activists. And so 6 months ago, we started in the Netherlands, where I live, a work group very inspired by the roadmap, the equality roadmap that was set in France by Agnès Salle, and to think also looking at other countries, other initiatives around the world, could we implement a similar system in the Netherlands, where the issues at stake are quite similar than the description that Irène and Marie just did. So this is what I will present very quickly. What was also striking trying to do a survey like Marie did is that we don't have the data, we don't have the numbers. So I had to gather from different sources, different websites, some 20 years old, some 10 years old, some 5 years old, but it's impossible to have an overview today of what is the position of women artists in the Netherlands. I look at other countries in Europe, if there's such similar survey exists. Germany is currently doing such a work. Pro Helvetia in Switzerland commissioned such a survey. Another country have some survey implemented, but we can see that data is fundamental to move forward, because that's where we can start to evaluate the situation. And last year, Solomon Godot, Abigail Solomon Godot, the feminist scholar, was here on this stage, and she was saying that maybe we should get rid of art history altogether, as this created the condition of this marginalization. So a point that we can argue, but I think it's good to remind here today. Looking at the history of women photographers who published, you could see that they were blurring gender representation, trying to find, through publishing, a platform for emancipation, to claim their artistic, economic, political, and sexual independence. And in this erasure, it's not only the artistic contribution that has been forgotten, and that's for me a very the core of my argument, but it's also the intellectual, scientific, political, social contribution, like we see also here today. And so researching through this publication, I came across key scholarly texts by women photographers that had been entirely forgotten. So there is room also to publish and republish all this material. So in 2014, I founded MetaBooks, my publishing house. It's also a research platform to contribute critically to this debate through organizing lectures, seminars, workshops, education projects. And in 2017, the movement initiated under the name Me Too changed everything for me. It changed my practice. It made me also rethink about experiences that could not have a space to be discussed. So I realized that publishing for me could only be publishing a feminist practice, a safe space for experimentation and reinvention, a space for coming to voice, for moving past fear, a space for embodying the change that I want to see. As Sarah Ahmed described in her Feminist Killjoy manifesto, I came to realize that the personal was also institutional, not only political, and that we had work to do. And gender discrimination, pay gap, psychological, sexual harassment in the streets, in art school, in institutions, violence are part of the experience that many artists have. It's also the subtext of my practice. So, what are the consequences of speaking up? Alienating? Liberating? No, that's not the right presentation. C'est pas la bonne. C'est pas l'autre. Bon, c'est pas grave. I'm gonna zap. Okay, c'est pas grave. So, silence is broken. I'm going to miss some data, but it's okay. Silence is broken. This is a poster I did for one performance recently where I do spoken words, and behind is a video animation triggered by artificial intelligence that responds to my voice, so that reacts to whatever I say. So that was a first attempt to kind of speak up. So there is a sense of urgency. It is a collective task and responsibility to write a different history, on one hand, of the woman artist. It is a moment, as we just saw, of resistance and imagination, a moment of self-reinvention, for speaking up, for speaking out, for talking back, and for breaking the silence in which these artists were cast. So, I'm also interested to develop this idea of a feminist archive, revisiting through the work of photographers, through my own practice. This is a recent exhibition in Amsterdam. I'm not going to go, as we're running a bit short of time, but it led me to think also what is the role of my own archive. Am I contributing to my own erasure or not? So I started to develop a publishing project. It's 10 books covering 10 years and 10 projects, my curatorial practice, writing and publishing, to make it in the form of paper books that can be easily accessible. So it's a form of transmission. So that's all I'm going to say about my own practice, but it led me, so as I said earlier, to develop this project. We started with 4 of us, artists, academic, researchers, curators, and one school, Artes, in Arnhem. And we have met regularly for the past 6 months, and we're going to do the first public event on the 18th of January in Arnhem at Artes. we have 4 areas that we're interested in: data, quota, art education, and discrimination and harassment. So as I said earlier, that was one of the main inspiration to start, and thanks to Agnès, we got English translation also available for us. So here's a quick presentation. More or less what I just said, but with the name of everybody. So these are the first bullet points that we have. Mobilize existing network and collective knowledge to establish the roadmap, monitoring, evaluation scheme, raise awareness, develop education project, commission survey, develop events, and influence political decision making. So let's start with the missing data. So this is more or less what I could gather. So so there are 14,000 artists in the Netherlands, half of them are women. In art education, 50% of women. Pay gap, 27%. When the average nationally is 15 to 17%. Pension gap, up to 50%. Access and opportunity, some museums don't have women in their collection. The best we found was Marseille, a photography museum with 45%. We have only data for 6 galleries. All you see question mark means we don't have any data. Work and family life, 75% of women work part-time in the Netherlands. Maternity leave, access depends on income. And 50% of the children on daycare, which means that the women stay at home because paternity leave is only 3 days. Art residency for families, no. Leadership position, yeah. So this is some of the data. So you will see they're all different because they all come from different sources. So this is, as you see, the gender repartition. So you see over the last 10 years it's quite even. Graduating students, you see it's also quite even. And this year, 2018, is actually equal. How does that translate afterwards in museum? So the column on the left is a work by men in the museum collection of the Van Abbey, and the tiny column on the right, I'll let you guess. How does that translate horizontally? So this is quite interesting because that's one of the few museums in the Netherlands who has actually done that survey of their collection. They implemented policies to allocate 50% of their acquisition budget to buy women and people from different minorities and to open up the conversation on archiving also in the museum. It's a project initiated by Galit Elat, but they are struggling to keep their own policy in place. So Metropolisem is a daily paper, not a daily, monthly magazine for arts. They are doing since a yearly survey. So you can see the numbers available for Dutch art museum. You can see some are 1%. And some don't have the data available. Stedelijk have 100,000 works in their collection. 4% works are by women, and in the rehanging of the collection that was made 2 years ago, only 12% of women. Which is the most important? One of the most in the Netherlands, yes. 4% is the average in Europe. So. In data collection, 3% you have to know is a margin error. So we're in that margin. This is another survey made by an organization called Mama Cash that does microcredit for feminist organization. They commissioned two scholars from gender studies in Utrecht to do a survey. So they went in the guerrilla girls tactic through the museum to count the works hanging on the walls for a certain amount of time, and so the total amounts 2.5%. Can do better, right? Temporary exhibition, the number was a bit higher, 29%. If you compare, above I put the worldwide test statistic done by Art Basel. Gender pay gap, you can see median and so, do I have to say the number out loud? Yeah. Then working part-time, measured against other countries in the Netherlands. You can see that's the last one, full employment. Parental leave, the same in regard to other countries. So that's a lot of pressure on women artists not to have access to daycare, not to have access to financial support. That means almost all the female artists that I know in the Netherlands look after the children for the first 3 years. How does it measure against violence? That was a slide that was in the other one, but we can also talk about this. 1 in 9 women was raped in the Netherlands, and the numbers are not going down. Quota. This is the state of things regarding quotas. They are only for corporate boards of large corporate companies, and they are not mandatory. So they were implemented in 2013 for 4 years, and they thought they would have reached the goals by 2016. Well, clearly not. So it has been extended, still not mandatory, till 2020. As we saw a few days ago with a statement of Adele Hanel, like the conditions are not there to speak up. And in the Netherlands, art education do not have any kind of reporting system. Museum don't have reporting system. Magazines and other platforms. Therefore, the condition, whether it's racism, any form of discrimination, harassment, psychological, sexual, or else, we don't have data available for the arts. And I could find only one survey for Belgium. The other country I couldn't find either. So a lot of work has to be also done in this area. So our first goal is therefore to create an incentive to work with the Ministry of Culture. In the Netherlands, the chance is the Ministry of Culture is also the Ministry of Education, Science and Emancipation. So we probably have a chance. So a very short survey. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Delphine.
Thanks, Delphine. And now I'm going to give the floor to Anna-Alix KOFFI. Let me introduce her. She's the director of collection and created and self-published the review. Each edition was accompanied by an effort to promote the artist. In 2016, produced the review Woman Paper. Since then, you've developed your projects between France and the African continent, and your most recent creation is the Contemporary Art magazine and Critical Thinking in Africa, Something We Africans Got. And more recently, you turned this into a magazine format, which is called Swag. Thank you for having invited me. I have much less figures than what we've heard so far. So let's go back to the title of our session today, Invisible. Produce figures, denounce invisibility. And when you introduced me at the beginning of the panel, I said that within my publication, Something We Africans Have Got, I was supposed to come and explain what I do. So what I do with this publication is basically to promote the work that others do, not necessarily my work. I'm not going to give you figures for a very simple reason, because it's difficult to identify in the media or in the mainstream media, be it on TV or on internet, so I can't give you fictitious numbers. I just want to give you names and give you the names of individuals who are promoting female photographers in Africa and the Black world. And I often refer to as Africa and the Black world, because Free Africa goes from Algeria to Cape Town. So I see 3 Africans in the audience. I see a young lady here who's also African, but it's not as obvious. But when we talk about Africa, in fact, next year we're going to hear a lot about it, because it's going to be the season of Africa, or the year of Africa. We have to remember that it's also Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, and it's also South Africa. With, of course, a white population, but it's still an African country. So to work on visibility of female African photographers, so we're not even at the stage of giving figures. We're just giving in the basic stage of trying to get recognition. Even if I can name 96 female photographers, some of whom are present here in a very beautiful way. Marianne Ibrahim in Prisme, and at the bottom at Double Performance, another woman, Ayana Jackson, and the South African Gallery Stevenson that's presenting Simona Wali. This is stand A20 with 2 photographers, and Ming Smith, because when we talk about the Black workers, people who are of African lineage, but we're also talking about people in the U.S. and in the Caribbean. Now, as for the names of the people who are involved in promoting female photographers, you have on the continent Olfa Feki, who's been working in Tunis, Salimatia Diop from Dakar, and also based in Paris, Azumbumu from Lagos. And in fact, there's a festival there that's just wrapping up. And the best of us left this world, BC Silva. She had led the Bamako meetings in 2015. In Cape Town, Koyo Koyo. And elsewhere in South Africa, John Fritzwood, Urshan Otol, the photography critic. These are names that you really need to remember if you want to understand what's going on. These are the best names, the top names. And in a few weeks' time, at the second event of Rencontre de Bamako, you have somebody who will be talking about Aziza Hermel, Astrid Le Poultier, who's half Malian, and Bonaventure is Cameroonian, and with Kosi Oye, where did I write his name? Let me see. Who's Ghanaian. From London, Chris Leine, who's of Cameroonian background, Zéro Whitley, American, and Eko Eshun. In Munich, there was another person who was extraordinary. Enweza. He was an extraordinary person who had directed a documentary at the Venice Biennale in 2015. He was at the Arts and Kunst, and who left a fantastic exhibit with a contemporary artist from Ghana. In photography, he's written many works, and what you must read is Snap Judgment in contemporary photography, which came out in 2006. And in Paris, you have people doing Simone Jamy, Elisa Pagana, Maya Nancy. These three are from Cameroon. Jeanne Mercier, she's actually in Marseille, not in Paris, but she works on the platform African Visu. She was one of the pioneers who took an interest in African photography. And at my end, what I've been working on since 2012, especially for Africa since 2016 with my magazine, I am trying to promote the work of all artists, not just photographers, from Africa. And once again, I would like to stress the fact this includes the Maghreb, that is the North African region. So the magazine that was promoting emerging photographs and old pictures, and when this project stopped, because in 10 volumes, I continue with Something We Africans Have Got. Here's this edition number 3, which is dedicated specifically to photography, and I'm working to have it come out in, well, I'm working on number 10 that will come out for the Bamako event, so very soon. And once again, this is the 10th edition. So the initiatives that I've noted are primarily in the Anglo-Saxon world for women photographers. There's a collective that's been organized by 2 photographers in Brooklyn, and they are trying to promote African women and women from the African diaspora. There are many exhibitions, but less than in Paris. And FANNIE has published this book, and they have started a magazine. I don't know how often it's going to be published, but Africa in France is sort of a niche market, even if it can sell well. So let me now take up a statement that I produced in Al, starting from the fact that there were simply no African photographers there. In other words, this would imply that the continent was blind. There was one photographer of African background, but African just the way I am, where we live in France. So we are not looking at Africa the way others can. And there was fantastic exhibits by Samsouzé and Monoprix, but he was the only one. I complained about it because I consider I'm an art activist with my publication. So I put myself in a room led by a foundation. I basically put a white sheet and I projected 100 African photographers there, the countries they were from, and the type of photographs or photography that they did. So it will be a shorter list. There are no figures. So, but I invite you to look up on internet all the names I mentioned. The women are absolutely remarkable, and you can see some of them here in Paris Photo.
Et en effet, je vous invite à aller voir le...
I urge you to look Marianne Ibrahim's gallery stand, who has dedicated 2 solo shows to Afro-American photographers and 1 artist who's from Ghana in Germany. And I talked with Marianne Ibrahim, who's in Chicago and who represents 12 women. So I'd like to salute her. It's the first time this gallery is here in Paris Photo. And it's really important to go see that stand. Anna? Should I introduce you?
Il fallait un homme pour régler le problème.
I know it in English.
Anna, just I introduce you one second. So, Anna Fox est l'une des...
So now Fox is one of the most acclaimed British photographers of the last 30 years. She is also a professor of photography at the University for the Creative Arts of Farnham. And she's recognized for one of her series, a 1988 workstation, which is a historical study of the company under Thatcher in Thatcher period. And then her work that was done over 5 years on black faces and Dutch blackface folk traditions associated with Christmas. Her collaborative projects were mentioned in 2010, 2019. You received you co-founded and participated in the work of the platform Fast Forward Women in Photography that you'll be discussing today.
It's great to see a good audience here of men and women interested in the subject of women in photography. I'm going to tell a story really about how Fast Forward started and what it's aiming to do. And I think one of the most important things of hearing some of the information we've heard today is, you know, the data is really, really important and not enough of it is being collected. And we all need to think about ways to raise funding to make that happen. And one of the big inspiring ideas behind Fast Forward was the idea of remembering not to forget. And I was interested in the last presentation with the names coming up, because one of the things that is also important in remembering not to forget is to keep repeating the names, to keep saying our names, our colleagues' names, photographers we know, and to keep talking and promoting ideas to do with women in photography. So back in 2013, myself and another colleague, Karen Knorr, who's here in the audience, were having a conversation about how many women, young women or various age women we were educating in our university. We work at University for the Creative Arts. And sometimes it's been up to 100% in our classes. That's mostly at master's level. At the undergraduate level, it can be between sort of 70 to 90%. Yet it's still evident that women are not getting on in the world of photography as in the same way as men are. Oh, so what's happening there? Sorry, I pressed it too hard. So, I mean, this is a website, obviously our website, which came about a few years after we started the project. And the key thing was to get research going off the ground, to start collecting it, to start talking about it, to start publishing it, and getting it out in the world. So this is the various research projects that we have, and we're about to have our third conference. The first one was at Tate Modern in 2015, the second one at the National Gallery of Arts in Lithuania, 2017, and the third coming up the 30th of November, 1st and 2nd of December, again at Tate Modern. So it's very important that we're working in partnership with these institutions. So Tate Modern and the National Gallery have been very significant partners. We're all working to collate and curate these things together. And we're also working with universities. University for the Arts in London is another key partner in this progress. We also after our first conference in 2015, I raised a Leverhulme Trust grant to create an international networking project for women in photography. And we went around to 6 different locations, which I'll talk about a bit more in a moment, to hold research workshops and discuss issues that were pertinent to us. So why was this research important for us now? Well, as I've said, it started looking at the classrooms. We know then when we started looking outside the classrooms into publications and exhibitions that women photographers' histories are not as well told or properly recorded. So again, it's an important thing for all of us to take on board. I mean, I'm a photographer and an educator, but I'm also interested in doing these other projects, and I work on several publications that are about doing research, practical guides to photography, and also curating exhibitions. And so part of my role is to be insistent that women are included in these things. So we know and we've heard from other speakers that there are other issues for women in society. And again, that was important in the Leverhulme grant, which really supports cross-disciplinary research, that we invited people from other disciplines into our discussions. And I really feel strongly, especially after again, that one presentation from the sociologist this just before ours, that it's absolutely vital to understand the background from other subject areas. So it could be politics, anthropology, sociology, gender studies, all these things. We need to invite people from these areas into our research, into our workshops, and into our study areas. So there were two key exhibitions as well that I wanted to talk about. I mean, they were quite some time ago now, in a way, but still very significant because, you know, some of our big institutions in the UK don't that often do big photography shows. And in 1989, the Royal Academy, one of our largest institutions, did the Art of Photography show with 98 photographers and only 4 women. In 2003, Cruel and Tender was the first major contemporary photography show at Tate Modern, 24 photographers and 3 women. Then later, 2016, another one of these kind of books, you know, 100 great photographers, only 14 women. And probably the one that incensed me the most was the 2017 BBC4 programme, which was a history of British photography in 3 parts. And the third one was a contemporary show, all about contemporary work. And in all 3, in the whole series, there were only 8 women, and all of them were deceased. There were women curators who spoke, but not women photographers who were live. There have been some fantastic books on women in photography, and these are just a few of them, dating right back to 1986. And then advancing into quite recent books like The Firecrackers, Female Photographers Now, and Girl on Girl. I'm sure there are many more outside of the UK and America. But one of the things that Delphine mentioned was that the photography art-based publishers are not publishing enough women. And when we started our discussion, Karen and I discovered that there were only between 2 and 5% women being published by the well-known art publishers in Western Europe and America. And this has improved, but I think it's too slow. I think all of this has been highly and very successfully fueled by movements like Me Too. And one of the things about Me Too that I think is important and we should continue to remember, again, is it shouldn't be a wave. People talk about the waves of feminism, and a wave goes up and then it goes down. And I think it's absolutely vital that we keep reiterating the points from the Me Too movement, so that we can keep reiterating the significance, and it's not a wave. So here was our first conference and our second conference, and again, one of the things about the project is about collaboration. There are lots of people doing various jobs. I can't mention them all, but you know, we're all very grateful that we're working together. And these conference projects are very, very important. The other thing that has been important, this is who we are, this is a steering committee, and again, it's important to have a wide variety of people from different parts of the world and from different kinds of communities and organisations. You can find all this on our website. So, in a way, the Fast Forward project has been so far primarily about networking. And the Leverhulme Trust grant was about joining 7 partners, because University of Creative Arts isn't on that list, but we were the lead partner, together to create these series of research workshops. And these partners basically gave their time and their organisation's time to make this happen. The money raised was to bring visitors in, to sponsor some younger people to travel, and to take our group round to all the various locations. So the hosts themselves, gave all their time and energy into organising these workshops, and they were fascinating. They were all recorded, but not for public consumption yet. They're recorded for our archive, on the basis that people could come and research in our archive to listen to them. So probably most important to that, actually, and these are the research workshops, is the collaboration with Catalogue Journal. Some of you will have been given this out. It's just come out. It's published by Jens Friis down here by Catalogue. And this is our way of recording what happened in the research workshops. So there are 6 conversations from the workshop hosts, and 3 portfolios, which were also, seen during those workshops. And so if you haven't got a copy, you can get your copy when you go out. Jens is also kindly going to pass around a mailing list. If you would like to hear more about Fast Forward and Catalogue, if you could sign your email address onto that mailing list, and please take your free copies of the magazine. I think you're going to pass it around now, hopefully. So these are the workshops, and again, you can go into each one and you can look at the summaries of what people spoke about, and obviously go to look up their work. Brazil, the US, India, Finland, Nigeria, and the UK. And of course, we would like to go to many more places. And we are applying for funding to expand this, because many more people in many more countries express interest in wanting to do a research workshop. Each workshop had about anything from 15 to 30 people in it, that we tried to keep them as intimate as possible and as little like conferences as possible. And lots of very personal information and important information came out of these, which I hope will lead to further grant applications of significance. But it also led to the theme of the 3rd conference at Tate Modern, which is how women work. And the other thing I was thinking that's just so vital, when you try to find videos of women photographers at work, it's really hard to find them. And, again, the speeches I've heard so far are so interesting, but I want to know how they happened. I would like to talk to Marie afterwards and find out how does she do her research. So these are the key important things, not just hearing the information and seeing the photographer's works, but how did they do it? How did this person with 2 children possibly manage through the mess that is our society, and how it tends to look after families, let's say. So we also gained further funding from the British Council in both West Africa and China to develop 2 mentorship schemes that have been pretty tough to run, I have to say, but they've been rewarding and really interesting both for us and the people taking part. So we have a group of West African and UK-based mentors who are currently showing their work in Lagos Photo, who we mentored for a year-long programme. And as well, Karen Noor and I mentored a group of emerging Chinese women photographers who've currently got their work on show at the Look Festival in Liverpool. And we go to Liverpool tomorrow to run a mentorship programme for 2 days there with the Tate Liverpool and Open Eye Gallery. There have also been shows and collecting policies that have changed. The Lightbox, which is a big public gallery in Woking in the south of England, curated a major historical show on British women in photography. We know that Tate Modern have now committed to exhibiting 50% women artists. The Hyman Collection of British Photography has committed to collecting 50% women. And from 2018, events at the Parr Foundation in Bristol have had 50% women speakers, which is a change. So we're glad. On our website, also, these are very important things. So the website is not just for women; it's for men and women to look at and find out about women in photography. There's also an opportunities page, and again, promoting women to get jobs, despite all, women have a lot of fears because of the way society is. So it's really, really important in our education system that we continue to say, go for this, apply for that. Put your work in for this. So the opportunities page is doing that for us, as well as us saying it. There's then a journal page, which we try to put as many articles or interesting exhibitions into. There's also a gallery page, which, again, if anybody's interested in submitting to this, please email us. We love to have a variety of work from all over the world. But there's another thing, I think somebody mentioned earlier, that one of the failings of our histories of photography is they are not very international. And that's something that really came to the forefront of our discussion through the research workshops. Maria Kapaiva, who's a very vital member of the Fast Forward team, she's the network facilitator, funded by the Leverhulme, runs a wonderful Instagram site, and we also invite people to do these collaborating conversations. So again, if you're interested in that, you can email us through the website. You can find our email address. But she's really racked up a lot of followers compared to the rest of our university projects. And here again is the magazines. It's really, really important. So it's not good enough just to have conferences and symposiums and discussions. There have to be outputs, and there have to be things going out into the world to create a legacy. There have to be archives curated. There has to be conversation. There have to be important people talking about things. So these are some of the great journals and magazines who've supported us, and I really hope through, again, seeing these names, people can respond to them and say, how valuable this is, and support these journals as well. What next? Tate Modern Conference, and we really hope to have a conference program every 2 years, not necessarily always at Tate, it depends who we're in discussion with. A Journal of Photography and Culture coming out in the spring, published by Taylor Francis. A range of different symposiums and workshops that we're in planning with. Some of these are definite, and some of these in very early stages. And further mentorship activity that we would really like to grow. And that's us.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. I don't know if it will be an honor, I think, to do something in France also with you, because we need, I think, more than 2 hours. And yes. Now we are working on with the groups, with the collective, with Marie, with Agnès and Marion and the ministry, to find a place, because we would like to extend the reflection and the discussions. So now we really would like to find the right moment and the good place to host an event like you are doing in UK or in Lithuania or everywhere. But I think also we need it in France.
Great, let's work together.
So it's a call also in the room, but we need institutions to welcome us. Yes. And today was, I think, a great moment. Thank you very much for your attention. But 2 hours, I repeat, but it's absolutely not enough. On a 10 minutes devant nous avant que Orlan...
Now we have 10 minutes before Orlan receives his Medal of Honor from the Royal British Photography Society. Any questions?
Un micro peut-être qui peut circuler?
A microphone, please.
Bonjour à tous, merci beaucoup pour vos passionnants.
Good afternoon. Thank you for those interesting presentations. I should like to come back on 2 things which were talked about on the round table panel. The time and then the the price you have to pay for activism, the energy you need. How do you finance these activities, those projects? How do you manage to do all this work on a free basis without being paid, on a volunteer's basis, and nevertheless you manage to make progress within systems which don't work? We try to do things, but we're not paid for our work. I think it's a global problem which is not only concerning photography, but arts altogether and other professions as well. I can say this as an independent curator. The question is always, how can you manage? And then you're often sort of pressed down by institutions. I know what I'm talking about. It's difficult to get our proposals accepted, and personally I cannot propose a solution. Marie, maybe you have an idea. Go on fighting.
Question de fond.
That's a very substantive and substantial question. For a few years ago, I received some money for personal reasons that I could pay my rent with, so I didn't have to go out and look for that money. And it's very important to say this because otherwise I couldn't do what I'm doing, and it reduced my expenses. And of course, what's at stake is terribly important. So it's all a personal question, and money is essential. And I decided I would no longer ever go out and agree to speak without being paid for it. I did it for 4 years. It's exhausting. It's a tremendous workload. We cannot continue to do that. At some point, you have to be able to move forward. So we, La Part des Femmes, we don't have money. I don't know how we do it, but this is fundamental. Money is of the essence. I have this time because, in a way, I'm privileged, but it's unfortunate. Or rather, I am speaking for those people who should be speaking, but who don't have the time to do it, who don't have the money to do it. So I feel that I have a special responsibility to speak for them or with them. At times, it's very tense because you have to live. But simply because I am in a privileged situation, I can speak for other people. But I'm always extremely careful about this because I may be making mistakes. I may be speaking for other people when I shouldn't. But the question of commitment is the same everywhere. And oftentimes those who speak out are those who are like us, people like us. Marie, is something very fundamental here. There's a commitment, but there's also collective action. So it's a call that you're launching. There's no parity. There's no representativeness. And we should not be afraid to work and to unite to make things move forward. Because when you say, don't speak for free, I don't work for free, I'm not going to read any portfolios, I'm not going to do anything for free. We have to do it as a united front. And we're afraid to, if you're alone, you're afraid to take that stance, to take that position. It's true, there's a kind of sorority as we unite. And sometimes that compensates the lack of money, but that...
It is a very important question. Not all of us have a lot of time and not all of us have enough money, but we all have a little bit. And the thing about sharing is if you just share that little bit of time or that little idea that you've got, it's going to be so valuable, I can't tell you. So you just have to get together with other people, and we have to understand that we can't all put the same in. It's not a competition, and we have to share. And we have to keep supporting and promoting each other. And I think everyone can do something. And the other thing is governments are right now talking about these things across the globe. So it's a really, really good time to tap in. If you look at our British government education policy, there's a lot in there about promoting women. And it's about promoting, women's lives to both men and women, to young men and young women, not just to women. So there's lots of opportunity, I think. The tiniest thing counts.
Yeah, I think so. Une dernière question, sinon je...
One last question.
Yeah, the rising fee to enter any education system is becoming a serious filter in terms of social group background, and I see that reflecting in the students that I have. For me, the question was like, how long can I keep teaching and repeating the same numbers over and over again to my students? Your prospect to enter a museum collection is between 0 and 4. What am I going to do about it? My generation. What are we going to do about it collectively? So this was the drive. So of course, when you start this kind of activist action, you know, no one is going to pay for it because no one's wanted. No one's want to see these numbers because as long as these numbers don't exist, then the reality doesn't exist. So that's a bit how it works. So the effort just to gather this took quite some time just to even bring these few numbers here today. And we were joking before. He said, "I don't have any." So at some point, it's a collective responsibility to, as I said earlier, bring back these voices that have been erased. This voice also that have been within my research. If I look at women photographers of color, they are entirely erased from the publishing history. It's very, very difficult to come by. So it's fantastic that there are initiatives today, online, offline, in print, to change that. So go to work.
Yes. Merci beaucoup à toutes et à tous. Marion.
Thank you to all of you. So this will be the very last word.
From the United States, and I was here last year. Fannie, thank you for your work that you did, and I was in the whole day conference, and I've spent the morning at MEEP, and this is a conversation that has been going on for hours today, and I think if I could bring it forward, it's the intersectionality that we got to in the conversation this morning, which is one person bringing up justice across the board. We're all victims of a white patriarchal colonial view. We've been given half the story, and all of us are finding our individual voices, but then we're siloed. It's like, am I going to bring women in photography forward? Am I going to be bringing women of color forward? Am I going to be bringing gender issues forward? And the fact is that we have to collectively figure out how to bring our silos together, because if we don't, we're just repeating what we are victims of, which is taking one perspective and making it universal. So it's an open question to say, how do we connect these dots? I worked for free for many years. The gallery that I ran, I didn't get paid for. There's so much work I've done that I don't get paid for. But it's all to try to get this going forward. I was the guest editor of the first women's issue a year and a half ago of the social documentary network publication Zeke, and I had 208 stories from around the world, visual stories by women, and I had a very intersectional jury picking the top 4 winners of the visuals, and I went through all the stories to come out with the 2 top themes. Sexual violence was so prevalent, I had to limit which ways I was going to look at it in the magazine. How sad is that? Then I did Women in the Economy, which luckily there were many stories of how women hold up more than half the world economically. Then I had to go outside the box because every person that I wanted to have write about those 2 issues of violence in the economy were white, and usually from the United States. So I literally had to say to my publisher, I chose a woman that was African American who had written 2 poetry books on embodiment to write the article on sexual violence. And I kept getting asked, like, she is a photojournalist. She has written academically, and she hadn't, but I put it out there for her to do. And I think we have to really think about something where we are not going to be given the space. We have to take the space, and we also have to fight about how to do it. And it is uncomfortable to say, like, are we a women photographer? I worked at a labor union many years ago, and when there was racism from the hiring hall, as a union, they decided we are only sending people of color out for this job. So there are some people doing quotas for getting intersectionality, and while that may feel uncomfortable, it may be one of the only ways to do this. I mean, we are still a predominantly white room talking to each other. That's not okay. So how do we get the silos together and move forward? That's my question.
Okay, we need to close. I'm very sorry because we really need another room to continue the discussion.
Non, moi c'était juste une information pour.
Some information for those persons who are interested. There's a podcast that's very interesting that's called Les couilles sur la table, balls on the table, and they've on music. Because in music, of course, it's a very bad industry in terms of gender parity figures. And there's a part on what they call excellence and social construction of excellence that's very interesting. And in the end, they put screens when the musicians play. And this basically doubled the number of women in orchestras.
So now we will invite